Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Movies That Move We. Thank you for joining us for another week. Um, I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day. Um, I did. I actually stayed tucked in bed all day. But yeah, I hope you guys had a great week. Today, we are going to be talking about Down in the Delta, 1998. And this one is a classic. But before we get into it, we're going to talk about our sponsors, Irby, Irby Entertainment, Irby Worldwide Entertainment. You can go to them for all of your DJing and entertainment needs. Follow them on Facebook at Irby Entertainment. Also, Share Dazzle Salon in Chesapeake, Virginia. They keep Nicole looking on point. They had nothing to do. This actually was looking a little bit better, but again, Share Dazzle had nothing to do with it. So if you are in the Chesapeake, Virginia area, go ahead and check Share Dazzle Salon out. And our last sponsor, Color You Cosmetics. You can find them at colourcosmetics.com, and make sure you spell it COLOUR. And they have an entire line of makeup products. They can teach you how to put makeup on because Lord knows I still need help. No shame in getting help. Contact Color You Cosmetics. So let's get into it, shall we? Down in the Delta, starring Mary Alice and Alfre Woodard. And if you're not familiar with not Alfre Woodard, you should be familiar with Alfre Woodard. If you're not familiar with Mary Alice, I will direct you to episodes of A Different World where she was the house mother, the dorm mother, if you will. Um, You'll recognize her face in the film once you see her, but she plays Alfre Woodard's mother. She's a widowed woman taking care of her grandkids. Her granddaughter is autistic, preteen grandson, as well as her adult daughter in her 30s who is strung out on drugs. And so, um, with stories of this type, you have a certain expectation, a certain amount of drama. Um, and this was kind of a measured movie. This isn't anything that gets too hype. There's no shooting, there's no murder, or anything like that. It's really a straightforward, what I call a straightforward story, um, that follows the path of the person goes from here to here. You see progress and growth. And so Mary Alice gets tired of her daughter. Her name wasn't Mary Alice in the film, but she gets tired of her daughter and is like, you cannot live here anymore. You cannot stay in this state. You need to go somewhere else. You have to get away from this environment because you're you're stagnant and we can't have that and it's affecting your children. So you're going to go down to my brother-in-law's. And so after many years of not talking to her brother-in-law, she calls and says, "Listen, need a favor." And he was reluctant, but that's his niece. Family takes care of family. Um, and they get down there, and it's an adjustment as expected for everybody. I'm going to pause right here because one of the things that, as I was watching the movie, I remember growing up, people always had that one relative down south that was it seemed like their sole purpose in life was to straighten out the wayward children in the family. And even though I didn't grow up down south, um, in my family, on one branch of my family, uh, my mom was that mother that, hey, if you got in trouble, you going over there and she's going to straighten you out. And that was enough to straighten out most kids because they're like, no, I don't want to go live with her. No, absolutely not. So it just kind of brought that to mind, that there is always that one family member. And uh, this this relative was it. And I'm pulling up these names because I don't want to mislead you on who was who. So this is a story of the Sinclair family, and they have deep roots down in Mississippi. And you find that out, and what the connection is. There is a character called Nathan, and the character is not a person. It's a silver candelabra that's at the center of the story. And this is why Mary Alice's character, Rosa, and her brother in law, Earl, are in a fight because she has Nathan. And Nathan, he feels like, should have came back to him because it was a family tradition of passing this down to the eldest member of the family. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm not going to give up any more about Nathan or why the candelabra was called Nathan. But there were some things that this film touched on, not to say these things never existed in the Black community, because the movie really went out of its way to emphasize this is what's broken in the community. You got people who are strung out on drugs, no fathers in the home. They kind of went along all of those tropes, but but um, they handled it in a way where they lined it up against the importance of knowing where you come from and having some roots to go back to. And that really helped move the story along nicely. It tied everything together. And like I said in the beginning, you saw where Alfre Woodard's character grew, where Loretta grew. There was no rehab. She didn't get to go to a facility. You went down south where there was fresh air, a slower pace, and where you had to pull your weight to stay with Uncle Earl. You couldn't just go and sit up and not do anything. And so he was patient with her and got her to a place where, with a little hard work and a little help from some other family and community members, she kind of found herself. She found what her strong suit was. She found what her strength was in this community that she hadn't been to since she was a kid. And it was, again, connecting back to her roots. And that's also when she learned the full story of Nathan and why Nathan was so important. And her being the eldest in her family, the eldest child, she understood why she was in line to get Nathan next and why her mother held on to Nathan so tight. And so I guess you can kind of call this a little bit of a coming of age story, because even her son Thomas, he had to grow. One of the things that this movie did not introduce, which I hate when I hear people say this when um, dad has either passed away or is absent in a household, that automatically the son is now the man, no matter how old he is or whether he's ready for it, whether he's emotionally or mentally ready for it, he's immediately made the man. That didn't happen in this film, and I loved it. However, you still saw him feeling responsible in some way for taking care of his mother and taking care of his sister. And he went out and earned his money his way. And he didn't tell anybody about it because, again, his mother was strung out on drugs. If she knew he had money, it was going right up her nose. So, uh, he had his secrets, and he had a little stash he was saving. And when the family found out about it, the first thing they thought was, oh my gosh, has he been running the streets and selling drugs? And what they found out was this young man had an entrepreneurial spirit. He was out there taking pictures of tourists and selling them for $5 a pop. And so it's a coming of age story in that way, where he went from having a mature mentality, and he didn't lose that, but he moved into a space where he got to experience childhood. And at the same time, even though he was allowed to move into an appropriate space, it still shows some growth for his character as well. Um, Other things that they touched on in this film that I don't know, I'd have to explore it a little more, that seemed a little progressive for a movie that was done in 1998. They talked about not just drug addiction, which is still a conversation today, um, but they talked about health issues that impact, but aren't necessarily handled in a medical space, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Excuse me. The little sister Tracy, uh, she has autism. She wasn't verbal throughout the whole movie. She pretty much screamed or didn't say much. It wasn't until she was in a new environment that she started speaking. And not full sentences, not anything wild and miraculous, but um, the fact that they even touched on autism and what it might have looked like, or what it looks like for some people, to me, that was a pretty big deal. But at the same time, you didn't see them running her off to doctors and therapists. It was something that the family took care of. The family nurtured the child back to that point. They changed their behavior around her, so she wasn't having the overload outburst that you might sometimes see with an autistic child. Um, and then there was Earl's wife, who was played by Esther Rolls, Annie. Annie had Alzheimer's, and you saw the lengths that Earl took to make sure that she was protected and she was cared for. He hired help to be in the house and supervise her at all times. Doors had to be locked. And those are things that, I don't know, we know it's there, but we don't really talk about it a whole lot. And the fact that this film shone a light on those types of health issues that families will undertake pretty much, I'll say, by themselves, for lack of a better term. You take care of family at home, even down to Loretta's drug addiction. Like I said earlier, she didn't go into rehab. She didn't go to a facility. She didn't have a whole lot of therapy. Not saying that those things are not beneficial or important, but the family took care of it and they nurtured it the best way they knew how. That being said, there wasn't a whole lot of Bible thumping, religious anything in the film. Like I said, it was a straightforward story, and it was done beautifully, told at a beautiful pace, I think. And what makes it a classic to me is that you could take this story. Not that I want to see this done as a remake. Please, nobody, please don't do it. But you can take this film and put it in another time, and it's still a consistent story. But some of the things that make this a classic are some of the nostalgic things that you recognize. So if you grew up in the 80s, like I did, things like noticing there weren't a whole lot of cell phones in anything. There were still house phones, there were still pay phones on the street. Um, there were no iPods or MP3 players or anything like that in anyone's hands, because that technology wasn't so prevalent back then. The big fancy thing was a Walkman. Which it's strange to me that you might still be able to find some Walkmans to play audio tapes. Um, Kids, go look that up. Uh, and they're about $30, which seems like that's ridiculous. Why does it cost so much? These things are pretty much obsolete at this point in history. But back then, if you were a kid and you had a Walkman, you can put your headset on. You didn't have to worry about your parents saying, "Turn that mess down. You shouldn't be listening to it. What is that ooga booga music you're listening to? That hip hop, that whatever you guys call it. I don't understand what they say." You didn't have to worry about that. You plug it in, put your headset on, clip your Walkman to your pocket, off you go. Um, and I even thought about video games that were available back then. The Nintendo wasn't this sleek looking box. It was big, it was beige, it had Nintendo in red letters. You had to plug in your controller. Everything was wired, basically. But there were little things like that kind of said, you know what, that is a time period. That period that the world's not going to look like that again. And the way things were handled back then, like I said, they took care of things at home. There wasn't rehab, not saying there wasn't, but it wasn't as accessible as it is now. So, um, for those reasons, that's why I call this movie a classic. Um, it's available on, gosh, I saw it on Pluto. Pluto TV, which you can watch for free. It does have some commercials. So if you haven't seen this movie, download Pluto on your your device and go ahead and check it out. Anyhow, that is today's review. Join us on Facebook. There are 3 questions to answer to gain entry into the group. 3 questions. We're not asking for your tax ID. We're not asking for your mother's maiden name. But we want to know that if you're going to join our group, you're going to interact, you're going to have these conversations with us, you're going to ask questions. Heck, even suggest other movies that you want to see. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our group on YouTube. So check us out there. Go to Media That Moves We on YouTube and click on the Movies That Move We playlist and go ahead, and we have like a year's worth of reviews. So go ahead, check them out, leave a comment. Again, ask questions. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to follow us on your platforms. My name is Nikkei. You can find me at nikkeywrites.wordpress.com. Uh, Go ahead and check out some of my work. And Nicole DeCandice at NicoleDeCandice.com. She couldn't be with us today, but definitely go ahead and check her out and see what she's up to. I know that she's working on some projects for her book right now. So go ahead and check her out. Check out some of her videos on YouTube as well. She does a lot of motivational work. So take a look at her page and check out Robert Rice Jr. on smoothology.net. You heard his music in the opening. Check him out. Download his music. And we will see you next week on Movies That Move We. Thank you for joining us. Until later. Bye bye.